Welcome to episode number 8 of the Hike Files podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Zitzelman. What's going on? This episode, I'm going to talk about, that time I broke my face hiking. You may have seen the video. This happened back in 2018. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about what happened behind the scenes and how I felt finishing a hike with a busted noggin. So this was back in September of 2018. It was myself, Dragon Rome's Skinny G Panda, and Chris Zabriskie. We were doing a section hike of the Appalachian Trail from Wind Gap, Pennsylvania, southbound to Lehighton, Pennsylvania. I had started the night before everybody else was getting there. Wound up meeting up with Chris Zabriskie. We stayed at the Outer Bridge shelter. The following morning, we met up with Dragon Rome's and Skinny G Panda and moved up to Wind Gap, leaving cars down at the Lehighton parking lot as well. And we started our hike. The first day was just a normal hike, relatively uneventful, just hiking kind of stuff. It wasn't until the final day when it happened. So we left camp probably around 8 a.m. Well rested, well fed. Skinny G Panda had brought in a bunch of food, made breakfast for everybody. And we hit the trail. We were on the trail for 3 hours or so, maybe. And we had gotten to a rock garden. And if you're not familiar with what a rock garden is on a trail, it's just a section of trail that is particularly rocky. Not a lot of dirt, just, anywhere from softball to basketball-sized rocks, maybe a little bit bigger, that you have to walk across, mixed with maybe boulders and things like that. And usually in situations like that, when we get to a rock garden or a really steep or tricky ascent or descent, if I'm not in front, I will wait for the person in front of me to get through so they don't feel like they're hurried or they've got to make a quick decision on where to put their feet and wind up falling. So I'm just standing there on a couple of rocks waiting for Skinny G Panda to go through. And behind me is Chris Zabriskie, and Dragon Rome's is behind all of us. And it happened so quickly, I don't even remember what happened first. If I start to move to begin crossing this rock garden, or if the rock moved under my foot first, I don't really remember. It was the decision in my mind was made to start to go, but I can't remember which one happened first. Either way, a rock went out from underneath my foot, and so I kind of was at an awkward angle. I leaned forward trying to catch my balance. I brought my other foot forward to try to catch myself. I tripped on a rock with that foot, which just sent me further forward. So then I tried to bring my other foot forward to catch myself, and I tripped on another rock. And at that point, I was out of control. I was careening headfirst towards a gigantic rock. And I don't even remember doing it. It was just instinct. But I tried to tuck and kind of hit the rock with my back. But with my awkward angle and my backpack on, I just couldn't get enough rotation. And I smacked face first on my left side right into a tombstone-sized boulder. And I hit it with such force that I heard this kind of crackling, snapping, slapping sound as my face hit, and I just saw a bright white flash. I kind of remember sitting up and immediately going for all of my buckles on my backpack, just undoing them and getting out of my backpack and looking up at everybody. And the first thing I think I said was, how long was I out? Because I just assumed I was unconscious. initially I thought as I hit that I was dead. I thought I just died. That's what I thought. But I sat up. And so first thing I say is, how long was I out for? And they're all still kind of turned and coming my direction. And they're like, you weren't, you didn't, you just popped right up. And I could not believe that. Nothing hurt yet, but I knew I had done some damage. So I just see first aid kits coming out of everybody's bags. I can feel like my face is starting to get warm, like the left side of my face is starting to get warm, and it's starting to throb a little bit. And I kind of looked down, and I had I touched the side of my face, I had blood on my hand, and I had scraped up my wrists. I knew I'd kind of hit my knee. I think I got like jabbed in the side with a rock. And that's when Dragon kind of looked at me and he's like, I got a picture of that happening. And I'll put that up right here. It's crazy when I look at this picture that I walked away from that. That was right before I hit. And you can kind of see how the backpack is just driving me into that rock. And there was nothing I could do. There's absolutely nothing I could do. Really quick thinking on everyone else's behalf to get their first aid kits out. They got me bandaged up. And they just start asking, what do you want to do? Are you okay to continue? Can you walk? So I stopped for a few minutes. I kind of took inventory of how I felt. And I've had concussions before. I know what it feels like. I know what to kind of look for in myself. And I felt okay. I felt relatively with it, even though I just railed my head off a rock. I was shaky, but I didn't feel nauseous. I didn't feel tired. I wasn't. They were asking me questions and kind of seeing if I was answering and if I was following what they were doing, and I seemed to be okay. But we were still at that point something like 5 miles from the end of the hike. And if you've ever hiked the Lehighton area of the Appalachian Trail, you know that heading south, you've got to go down the gigantic bouldery rock field that is the knife edge on that side of the gap. Now keep in mind, I've got a severe fear of heights. And right at that time, I then also had a severe fear of rocks because I had just taken a header into one. So, like, I had never seen that section of the AT before, so I didn't know. I knew it was rocky, and I knew people said it was a little tricky, especially if you had fear of heights. But I figured we were pretty close to the next road crossing. So I basically told everybody, I said, listen, I'm going to take my time. Let's get to the next road crossing, and I'll see how I feel. Maybe let's stop. I'll get something to eat. I'll drink something, and I'll see if I feel like I want to vomit, or if I start feeling really shaky, or I get tired or really achy or something like that. I don't even know if I can walk at this point, because I know I'd hit my knee, and I didn't know if I had messed anything up in my legs. So we hike, I don't know, maybe the mile to the next road crossing, half mile to a mile, and I think it was just like some boulders there. I wound up sitting down and getting some food, making some lunch, like making real food, not just having a snack, but eating some real food, drinking some water, and I felt okay. And I could feel that I hit my knee, but it wasn't sore. It wasn't hampering my movement at all. My arm was a little sore where I hit it, and my head was pounding, but I was fine. So I took some Advil or whatever they had that they gave me for my headache, and decided I'm going to keep going. And as we're sitting there and I'm deciding I'm going to keep going, this guy walks by and he's asking us, oh, did you guys stay out last night? Are you staying out tonight? Which way you headed? Where are you going? And we tell him which way we're going. And he just kind of looks at us and he's like, he goes, I did that years ago going northbound, and I don't think I would go down that side of the trail. It was tough enough making it up it. I don't think I'd go down it. It's pretty sketchy. And I'm thinking, oh, great. This is what I need, a sketchy descent at the end. But I was determined to make it through. So we continued on. Luckily, the section from there to the really sketchy part was really simple. I just took my time and noticed that everybody was kind of roundabout ways, stopping and making sure I was doing okay and asking questions, and which was fine, which was they should have been doing with what happened to me. They should have been checking on me, making sure I was okay. And then we get to the descent, and we get to this. As you approach this descent, it's a ginormous boulder field on the side of a mountain. Basically, there was mining done in that area, and it just destroyed all the vegetation on that side of the mountain. So it's just rocks, and it's kind of crumbling away. So you got to go across this big open boulder field that is the side of the mountain. And then you get to a point where you've got to go up and over this boulder, and you're way up over Lehighton Gap. And that's when the fear of heights kind of kicked in, but I knew I had to keep going. So I got a banged up leg and a banged up arm, and I'm a little nervous of rocks, and I'm crossing a giant boulder field, and my head's pounding, and it was not fun. It wasn't fun. I just had a picture of myself. At that time I was doing the live stream on YouTube, and I had put up a picture just saying that I wasn't going to make the live stream that night. And it was just a picture. Let's see if I can find it here. It's I do not look happy in this picture. It's as we had just crossed that knife's edge, and I knew I wasn't gonna make it onto a live stream. There's no way. We still had to make it out of the car, and then they had to drive me back up to my car, and I had to drive home. So we made it down to the bottom, and I survived, and I recorded the trip. I recorded the injury. I documented everything from the time I fell to the time I got to the car, just kind of for me and also for other people who might get hurt on the trail. But in my mind, after I fell, I was so freaking embarrassed. Like, there's no reason to be embarrassed. Accidents happen. It can and probably will happen to anybody who hikes any amount of time. Something will happen. I felt like such an idiot. I was just standing there and I fell. But so I kind of was dealing with that for the first probably hour after I fell, and was really in the back of my mind, like, oh, I fell down and I look like an idiot, and I don't know. It's a weird situation to be in when you something simple like that, just standing there and getting ready to walk, is what almost takes you out. And I was so lucky that if I was a little more face forward, I would have like smashed my nose or taken out an eye. I could have like crushed my temple. I'm so lucky that I just had like a cut, and I healed up in a couple of days and I was fine. But I remember leaving there. We got in the car. We're driving back up to Water Gap so I can get my car, or I'm sorry, up to Wind Gap so I can get my car. And that's when Dragon just kind of mentioned, hey, we're going to Kentucky next month. Do you want to go? And I was like, yeah, let's go. I still wasn't even completely with it after the fall, but I'm like, yeah, let's go do that. And I get back to the car. They leave, and I'm getting in my car, and this guy comes up, and it's getting a little dark, I guess. And I guess he couldn't see that I had like this big bandage on the side of my head, and there was like dried blood, and I had my bandana on, and that was like drying to the wound, and I had blood on my hands. I was all jacked up, And he starts asking me about the trail, where I stayed, and all this stuff. And I'm trying to be polite and talk to him about it. But at the same time, I just want to sit down. I just want to get home, take all my stuff off, wash up, and just pass out. And I had to be there for 45 minutes talking to this guy. And finally, I just looked at him. I'm like, hey, look, man, I had a pretty decent fall today. And I'm like, I'm all cut up and scraped up and bleeding, and I just want to go. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't know. I didn't notice. And so I wound up leaving, but got home and it was good. But like I said, I healed up a couple days later. But it is important that if something like that happens to you, if you fall, if you're with other people and they're checking on you, don't get upset. They're doing what they should do. They're checking and making sure you're okay, especially if it's a head injury, because at any point, I may have been fine, but with a head injury, you never know. You could just turn around and all of a sudden it takes a few minutes for it to really affect you. And then they could have been around the corner from me on a trail, and I could have collapsed, and I could have been on the edge of a drop off or something. I could have hit my head on another rock. Any number of things could have happened. So I was very grateful for them for checking on me, making sure it's okay, their fast reaction when it initially happened. But you got to take stock of yourself. And if I really didn't feel like I could continue, then I wouldn't have continued. And it wasn't a macho thing. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I felt okay. I felt just a little banged up, but I felt okay, and I wanted to finish the trail. If I would have felt nauseous at all, or if I would have thought that in any way I was concussed, I would have stopped. I would have gotten to that road crossing, and I would have just stopped. And whatever I had to do, if I had to wait there for them to go get their car, or whatever would have happened, I would have figured it out there. But I would not have continued. And I made that decision as soon as I thought about continuing. And they're like, are you okay? Can you continue? And I was, if I can't, I'll let you know. I wasn't going to try to be macho about it. I wasn't going to put myself in a worse situation, especially knowing that there was a potentially sketchy section coming up, which was extremely sketchy. So if I would have gotten to that point and I was just trying to be macho man and continue that hike, I would have been in a lot of trouble. Now, I do know there's a winter route that goes around that sketchy drop, but even that's not the simplest thing in the world. It's easier than that rocky over the knife edge kind of drop down to the parking lot. But I would have had to turn around and go back I think it's like a quarter of a mile to a half mile from the knife edge where you gotta go back to get to that cutoff trail, and then follow that cutoff trail down. So I would have added like another maybe a mile to my hike, plus the distance of that winter trail that adds. So it wouldn't have been worth pushing it just to finish the hike. I could always gone back and finish that section later. So if you get injured on the trail, be smart about it. Don't feel like you need to continue. Don't feel like you need to prove anything. It doesn't matter how big the hike is, how small the hike is, or how tough or macho or experienced or great you are at hiking. It's not worth dying for. It's not worth permanent injury for. Be safe out there. And I like to say always hike with somebody, but we all know that doesn't happen, especially if it's a day hike. Even backpacking, you're not always hiking with other people. When I hike alone, when I'm doing solo backpacking trips especially, I always use at least one trekking pole. A lot of times too, in tricky areas, I slow down more, and I just try to keep in mind that I'm by myself, especially when I'm really remote. So don't feel like you gotta be macho and push through, or you gotta prove something to anybody, or you're super experienced hiker and you can do anything. If you're injured and you don't think you can make it, then don't do it. There's nothing wrong with bailing. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Hike Files podcast. I will talk to you again next week in episode number 9.